Hi, in this lesson, we're going to talk about how to iterate through the items in an array. Let's start by looking at an example. Suppose we work for a team of biologists, and they want to know how many frogs live around ponds in the state of Virginia. To do this, they've counted the number of frogs at each pond across the state, and have saved the data in an array shown here. Each element represents the number of frogs at a particular pond. And for simplicity, let's say there are a total of 1,000 ponds. In order to get the total across the state, we need to sum all of the individual elements together. We could painstakingly do this with the indexes like this. But this is terribly inefficient and difficult to do, especially with 1,000 elements in the array. Instead, let's use our trusty for loops to iterate through each element very quickly. We're going to talk about two different types of for loops to accomplish this. The first is using the traditional for loop structure, which takes advantage of the built-in array property length. This property returns the number of elements in an array. So, if we have our grocery list array like this, indexed from 0 to 2, then grocerylist.length is 3. Again, notice that the highest index in the array is one less than the length of the array because the index starts at 0 instead of 1. This is important because if we look at the iterating variable I in the for loop, it also starts at 0 and will increase until 1 less than the array's length. So for the grocery list, the variable I will equal 0, 1, and 2. This means we can easily use I as the array index for each iteration of the loop to access each element in the array. For example, adding a print line that prints the element of the array at index I will result in kiwis, pasta, and eggs, each printed on a new line. Looking back at our original frog count example, this loop is summing up all the values in the array and printing the result. Pretty easy. The second type of for loop that helps us iterate through an array is even simpler. It's called the for of loop and looks like this. In this case, we don't need to know anything about how many iterations are required. It automatically will just loop through each element, assigning the value to the iterating variable. So going back to our grocery list example, we have let item of grocery list as our loop, which means the item variable will iterate through each food item in the array. If we were to run this, we'd get the same result: kiwis, pasta, and eggs, each printed on their own line. Notice that we did not have to use the array length or any array indexing in this setup. For of loops are the easiest option when we are only interested in the values of the elements, not the indexes. Let's take a look at how this looks in our frog example. You can see that the structure of the program is the same. Just the for loop is a little simpler since we don't need to use the array length property or any array indexes. Let's jump into the editor to take a look at a new example. Okay, in this example, we've been given an array of test scores and have been asked to calculate the average test score. So let's start by finding the sum of all the test scores in the array. So we'll create a sum variable and set it equal to 0. And then let's iterate through each score in the test scores array by using the for of loop. So let score of test scores. And now we'll say that the sum is going to add each score, which is each element within the array. And let's just print out the sum to start to see how that for loop did. Okay, 526. So that is the sum of all the test scores. Okay, so in order to calculate the average, we need to take the sum and divide it by the number of test scores that we're averaging. So to do this, let's create a variable called average, and we'll take the sum that we just calculated and divide it by the length of the test score array, which is the number of test scores that is in the array. And if we print out this average, we will get 87.6 repeating. So that is the average test score of all the test scores in the current array.